Hello, and wishing you a very
day from a lovely afternoon, a warm, sunny afternoon in Geneva. My name is Kate Lannon. I'm the Senior Legal Officer with the Secretariat of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And it's my distinct honor
distinct honor to be with you
to
today to
moderate
moderate.
today's webinar. Of course, as you know, today's session is in honor of marking this very important day, which is the fifth anniversary of the entry into force of the Protocol to Eliminate Illicit Trade in Tobacco Products. Now, in order to mark this important day, we have a number of fantastic speakers with us today. But before we go any further, please, a few elements that we need to cover. First of all, we do hope that you are prepared to ask some questions after you hear from our important panelists today. So please, for this purpose, use the Q&A function you will find at the bottom of the screen and simply type your questions in there, and we'll address them during the question and answer session. Please do not use the chat function for any purpose other than addressing a technical issue that you may have that we can then help you with. So please use the Q&A button for asking any questions. In addition, we're very pleased today to offer you simultaneous interpretation in all 6 languages, official languages of the UN system. So please, I'm sure you're used to this already, please simply click on the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen and choose your preferred language so that you can follow along in your own language. So now, without any further comment from me, I would like to give the floor to the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, who's been kind enough to prepare a video message for today's event. Please, from Dr. Tedros.
Ms. Hekali Zimomi, President of the Meeting of the Parties to the Protocol, Dr. Adriana Blanco, distinguished representatives of parties to the protocol, dear colleagues and friends. The protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products is a powerful tool in our fight against tobacco, which kills well over 8 million people globally every year. The single most effective tool for reducing tobacco use is taxation, but illicit trade blunts that tool. It deprives governments of an estimated $47 billion in tax revenue annually. Illicit tobacco products exacerbate inequalities because they are often cheaper and more accessible to at-risk groups such as young people. Weak governance and regulation, corruption, insufficient enforcement capacity, and organized crime networks are all drivers of illicit trade. Stopping it requires a comprehensive multi-sectoral approach and international cooperation, which is given a legal basis in the protocol. As we mark the 5th anniversary of the protocol's entry into force, I'm pleased to note that it has been adopted by 67 countries and the European Union. Congratulations to Poland for becoming the latest country to join. Each new member makes the protocol stronger. Thank you all for your continued commitment to the fight for a tobacco-free world.
So with thanks, of course, to
to
Tedros for those important words providing some context for what the protocol is attempting to achieve, and of course some sobering statistics as well. We now also have a video greeting from the president of the Meeting of the Parties to the Protocol, Ms. Hekali Zimomi. Ms. Zimomi is, of course, Additional Secretary from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare with the Government of India. So may we please have her video.
Dr. Adriana Blanco Marquizo, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual meeting to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the entry into force of the Protocol to Eliminate Illicit Trade in Tobacco Products. As we celebrate this important milestone, it is vital for us to recall that development and adoption of the protocol is the result of close cooperation between the parties and multiple sectors of government, demonstrating how a unified stand on a public health subject can benefit important government objectives on health and beyond. It is my honor to serve as the president of the Meeting of the Parties to the Protocol, the MOP. Together with my fellow members of the Bureau of the MOP, our regional coordinators, and with the support of the Convention Secretariat, we have been reviewing the progress of the work as per the directions of MOP 2 decisions, and have also been working over the last 2 years to organize the third session of the MOP that will take place in 2 months from now in Panama. This will be the first time that a session of the MOP is going to take place outside Geneva, and we thank the government of Panama for hosting us. During the third session of the MOP, parties will have important discussions on issues such as evidence-based research, the global progress on the implementation on the protocol, and on tracking and tracing of tobacco products. The decisions that we are going to take in November will guide how we progress towards the objective of the important objectives of the protocol. Continued intersectoral and international collaboration, including cooperation with relevant international organizations as called for in the protocol, will be crucial to our success. As we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the entry into force of the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products, let us all commit ourselves to the continued fight against tobacco as we move forward. Thank you.
So thank you very much to both previous speakers, both for their video greetings to all of us, and of course for their important leadership on this very key topic. Now, as the final speaker in this opening introductory section of today's webinar, I would like to welcome the head of the Convention Secretariat, the Secretariat of the FCTC, Dr. Adriana Blanco Marquizo, to join us with a few words. Over to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Kate. And from a not so sunny Finland, I want to address this group. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, we gather today to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the entry into force of the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. This was the first protocol to the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or WHO FCTC as we call it, and was adopted by consensus on the 12th of November of 2012 at the 5th session of the Conference of the Parties to the WHO FCTC. It entered into force on the 25th of September of 2018, following the deposit of the 40th instrument of ratification, and currently has 68 parties, with Poland's accession to the treaty only 4 days ago. This is still a young treaty, has the ambitious objective of eliminating all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products. The protocol covers important matters concerning offenses, with provision on liability, prosecutions and sanctions, payment seizures, and special investigative techniques, as well as the disposal and destruction of confiscated products. It also addresses the crucial issue of international cooperation, with measures on information sharing, technical and legal law enforcement cooperation, and mutual legal and administrative assistance, among others. The protocol particularly aims to secure the supply chain of tobacco products through the implementation of provisions that cover licensing, due diligence, record keeping, and security and preventive measures, as well as measures in relation to internet and telecommunication-based sales, duty-free sales, and free zones and international transit. But the measure widely considered to be the heart of the protocol is the establishment of a global tracking and tracing regime comprising national and/or regional tracking and tracing systems and a global information sharing focal point, the GSP. Today, it's our pleasure to present the GSP, a system that will be accessible to all parties to the protocol for the purposes of further securing the supply chain and to assist in the investigation of illicit trade in tobacco products. Developed by the Convention Secretariat in collaboration with the United Nations Computing Center and under the guidance of the Bureau of the Meeting of the Parties to the Protocol and the Working Group on Tracking and Tracing, this new tool will enable parties to make inquiries and receive relevant information from other parties, so strengthening international cooperation. I encourage parties to the protocol to make good use of the GSP in their joint effort to fight against illicit trade in tobacco products. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Kate.
Thank you very much, Adriana, for those important words, again, helping us to frame the context of today's event and why we're all here together. So moving on with our agenda, I don't know how your geography is, but if it's pretty good, you know that Geneva is not very far from Cannes. So we are very pleased today to have our very own world premiere event and to offer you for the first time the opportunity to watch a video that has been prepared specifically to mark today's important occasion. May we have the video, please?
Illicit trade in tobacco products undermines tobacco control measures and poses a threat to global public health, security, and government revenues. To address this global concern, the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products was adopted under the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Implementing the protocol helps parties to achieve the objective of the WHO FCTC and to address key issues like transnational organized crime, poverty, tobacco-related diseases. Illicit trade in tobacco products generates financial profits that are used to fund transnational criminal activity. These crimes are undertaken by large and organized syndicate groups who pose serious threats to the financial security and law and order of the countries they operate in. Illicit trade in tobacco products circumvents price and tax measures, making smuggled tobacco products more affordable and accessible to low-income populations and young people. This greatly contributes to poverty, as essential items such as food and shelter are neglected. There is a link between illicit trade in tobacco products and the high incidence of tobacco-related diseases. Treating these serious diseases imposes heavy financial strains on countries' health systems, especially for low and middle-income countries. The protocol aims to eliminate all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products through a comprehensive package of measures. These include measures to secure the supply chain, facilitate investigation and prosecution, and foster international cooperation. Illicit trade in tobacco, death, violence, and poverty. It's all connected. Let's work together to break the chain and support the protocol. Learn more about it here.
Thank you very much to colleagues both for having prepared that video, which really very importantly highlights the cross-border issue that we are dealing with when we're talking about the illicit trade, in tobacco products. And of course, the protocol is the global response to that global problem. And at the very heart of the protocol, as Adriana pointed out, is the tracking and tracing of tobacco products. So coming now to the focus of today's live event, which is a panel to discuss tracking and tracing of tobacco products. So, of course, our first speaker today is Mr. Rodrigo Santos Feijó. So many of you know Rodrigo very well. He is, of course, a program manager with the Secretariat of the WHO FCTC and our dear colleague. And here, his work with us here is not only in the area of program management, but he also is a key member in helping us implement the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. So today, Rodrigo will give us an overview of tracking and tracing systems and relevant measures to, of course, control the supply chain of tobacco products pursuant to the protocol. Over to you, Rodrigo.
Thank you very much, Kate, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever participants are. So today I will be doing some actually introduction to the most exciting presentation that will come afterwards on the global information sharing focal point, but trying to give you some information on tracking and tracing systems as described under Article 8 of the protocol. Next slide, please. So when we start discussing tracking and tracing, we still see ourselves the definition of tracking and tracing under the protocol, if we look at Article 1 of the protocol, is the systematic monitoring and the recreation of the national authorities of the route or movement taken by the items through the supply chain, right? So talking about the ability of national authorities to recreate the route of the product throughout the supply chain. And this will be used, as you know, we heard from the opening remarks, to assist parties to in determining the origin of tobacco products and where applicable, the point of diversion, right? Where a tobacco product was diverted from the licit market to the illicit market, right? And to monitor and control the movement of tobacco products and their legal status. Next slide, please. But when we talk about recreating the route throughout the supply chain, again, we might question ourselves and say, what are we talking about here, right? And again, I think we can turn to the protocol to find the answer. Under, again, the Article 1 on the definitions, the protocol defines that the supply chain covers the manufacture, the import and export of tobacco products and manufacturing equipment, right? So this will be the basic definition of supply chain. We need to at least be able to have information on manufacturing, import, and export. But the protocol says that where relevant, parties, they might wish to decide to extend the concept, right, of supply chain to cover other parts of this chain, including, for example, the retailing of tobacco products, the growing of tobacco, tobacco as, you know, the raw material for producing tobacco products, the transportation of commercial quantities of tobacco products, wholesaling, brokering, or warehousing. So basically, the protocol says the basic is the import, export, and manufacturing, but you can expand this to cover the whole supply chain, meaning all the other steps that will take from the moment that the product is produced, is manufactured, to the moment that, you know, a user is buying the tobacco products. Countries have taken different approaches here, right? We have a number of countries that they use their tracking and tracing with the concept of supply chain, really focus more on the manufacturing, import, and export of the products, while many other parties are already expanding this and covering the whole supply chain, right? The benefits of doing this is that, you know, basically, when in the previous slide, we were talking about identifying the specific point of diversion into the illicit market, when the country is really covering these other aspects of the supply chain, the other steps of the supply chain, is when the country can really identify where, in which of these steps, that the product was diverted from the legal or from the licit to the illicit market, and help them with the investigation of illicit trade in tobacco products. Next slide, please. So what is the objective and what are we talking about here, right? Again, we heard from Adriana that the protocol talks about doing tracking and tracing of tobacco products with the purpose of further securing the supply chain and assisting in the investigation of illicit trade, right? The protocol talks about a global tracking and tracing regime that should be established within 5 years of entry into force of the protocol, which we are celebrating here today, right? This global and tracking and tracing regime would be composed or would comprise the national and regional systems and a global information sharing focal point that would allow the exchange of information between the national and regional systems. And this global information sharing focal point should be developed by the Convention Secretariat and made accessible to all parties. Next slide, please. But how can parties really, track and trace the tobacco products? The protocol will establish that really the requirement to enable a party to do that is uniquely mark all tobacco products, right? So the parties, they will need to develop systems that are controlled by the parties and that covers all tobacco products that are manufactured or imported into their territory, right? So all tobacco products that are manufactured or imported into a party's territory, they will need to be uniquely marked with a code that would be issued by a competent authority in that party, right? And when we are talking about those codes, we are talking about something that we will hear a lot, that are the UIMs, the Unique Identification Markings, right? Those markings, according to the protocol, they need to be unique, secure, and non-removable. They should be affixed to all unit packs of tobacco products, right? So I think we are talking about really the final pack of tobacco products, each of them having a unique number. And this should, the protocol establish that a time frame for implementing that of 5 years for cigarettes and 10 years for other tobacco products. Here, I'd like to take the time again to make a difference between the tax stamps that, we know that many parties are doing, and really what we are calling the unique markings here, right? Tax stamps, they are a very, very good means of parties to use to ensure that they can define if a product is licit or illicit. But according to the protocol, what would be, as I was saying, a minimum requirement for the system to be considered, like a tracking and tracing system, is to have unique markings per pack. So we are not talking about like a barcode that is used for all the same brands of tobacco products. We are not talking about, a code that could be used for all the products. No, we are talking about a code that would be really uniquely affixed to every single pack of tobacco products. So every single pack will need to carry these unique numbers. Next slide, please. And which kind of information we need to have in this, in the tracking and tracing, right? The protocol established that as part of those UIMs, so something that should be already pretty much integrated into the national or regional tracking and tracing systems, the parties, they should have information on date and location of the manufacturer of tobacco products, the facility where those products they were manufactured, the intended market of retail sale, and the description of the product, right? So this should form part of the UIM. So as again, talking about like a minimum requirement, the system should contain all this information. But the protocol says that through the global information sharing focal point, so through the exchange of information, parties shall be requested to report on other information as well, on further information. And these will include, for instance, information on the specific machinery that was used to produce the tobacco products, the specific production shift of the manufacturing of those tobacco products, the first and any subsequent customers as possible, as much information as possible, information on warehousing, and the shipment route details of tobacco products. Again, the protocol will not say that these need to be part of the UIM, but a party needs to be able to provide information on all of this to another party if asked to do that. So through the Global Information Sharing Focal Point, all this information, the parties, they would be able to request to another party to help them in the investigation of illicit trade in tobacco products, right? And when would those markings be affixed to the tobacco products? Again, the protocol will establish that this should be done at the time of the production of manufacturing of tobacco products, at the time at the first shipment by any of the manufacturer, or at the time of the import of the tobacco products into a territory, right? But this should be done, as we see, before the products are really put into the market, right? So this is something that the products, they should be all marked, uniquely marked, before they are put into the market. Next slide, please. Okay, one, I think, important element that we have here is the issue of the tobacco industry. And, the protocol itself recognizes that parties will need to engage, to interact, with the tobacco industry to implement tracking and tracing systems, because, we are talking about putting some requirements on the tobacco industry and others involved in the supply chain of tobacco products, right? So interactions, they will be required. But the protocol will establish that those interactions, they should happen only when, to the extent is strictly necessary in the implementation of the tracking and tracing systems, right? So tobacco industry, they should not be part of the discussions on the development of the system and any decision-making process that the party is doing. The tobacco industry, the government should be interacting with them only when is strictly necessary to the implementation of the tracking and tracing. And another thing that the protocol will say, that I think, again, it's something that parties, they discuss a lot, is that the costs of implementing tracking and tracing, they really, the party might consider transferring those costs to the tobacco industry, right? So parties are taking different approach to do that, while we have some parties that they do that by charging per UIM, per unique marking. They charge a fee, and then through that, they recover the costs that they have invested in their tracking and tracing systems. We see other parties that they are progressing towards a model where they select a provider of a tracking and tracing system in their territory, in a sort of and they require that the tobacco industry pays directly this supplier that was appointed by the government as the supplier of tracking and tracing for that party, right? So this is another way that parties can be transferring the costs, can ensure that the tobacco industry will be bearing the costs of tracking and tracing system. Next slide, please. So now turning more towards, I think the discussion that we are having today on the global information sharing focal point, we need to really look at the working group on tracking and tracing system, right? This working group was first established by the first session of the meeting of the parties, but had its mandate extended by the second session of the meeting of the parties. And in this second session, the MOP, the meeting of the parties, the governing body of the protocol, has requested the working group to further develop the technical specifications of the GSP, the Global Information Sharing Focal Point. This second session of the meeting of the parties also requested or mandated the Convention Secretariat to develop the Global Information Sharing Focal Point that we are going to present to you today. And in that decision, they defined that this system should be established as an encrypted manual messaging system, right? Next slide, please. So to develop these global information sharing focal points, we have turned our attention to another very important decision that the second session of the MOP has taken. That was the conceptual analysis on the global information sharing focal point, right? This document is available as a supplementary document for in the page of the second session of the MOP. And this document is a very important document that is really guiding the way that we are developing the Global Information Sharing Focal Point, or the GSP. The document establishes the steps and the process flow for the exchange of information, but defines, most importantly, key requirements for the functioning of the system. And this includes that the system should be, we should have trust in the system. So, the system should be very secure for parties to be able to exchange the information that they have in the system. The system should have a minimal impact in the national and regional system, right? Should have technological neutrality, and should have scalability, meaning that as the protocol grows, as more parties to the FCTC becomes party to the protocol, this system should also be able to take those more parties on. The system, the conceptual analysis talks a lot about also the confidentiality issues, and how this information needs to be exchanged, and issues related to language and so on. But most importantly, this defines really that the global information sharing focal point will be what we call a query-based system. We are not talking about a global, repository of all information from all systems all over the world. We are talking about a system that will allow parties to communicate one with another, right? So it's a system that party A will be able to, or party one will be able to make a query to the global information sharing focal point that will route this query to the party that has issued that UIN, that code, that UIM. This party 2 will produce a response that will be routed to the global information sharing focal point, so that the answer can be given to party 1 that has made the request. So we are really talking about a concept that is quite common for colleagues working on customs, right? This kind of query-based systems, but we are talking about a very secure encrypted messaging system, right? So a system that only the parties that are communicating can really have access to the information that is being exchanged. Not even us from the Convention Secretariat or from the United Nations International Computing Center, UNICC, they are able to see what is being exchanged between the parties. And I'll stop my presentation here. That was my last slide, just our website and our social media channel and our email in case you have any questions and you want to reach out to us. Thank you very much, Kate. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for that very clear and thorough explanation of tracking and tracing systems and what is expected and what the obligations are under the protocol, and in fact, how the GSP is constructed in order to meet those expectations. So if I can just remind participants in today's meeting, if you have questions, please do type them into the Q&A section that you find at the bottom of the frame. So without any further delay, we come to our second speaker, who is, of course, Mr. Shashank Rai. Shashank is the Chief Technology Officer at the United Nations International Computing Center, or UNICC, as we also refer to it. Shashank runs the Strategic Consulting Unit, and in the course of that work, he advises a number of members of senior leadership from multiple international and other client organizations. So Shashank is with us today, and we're very grateful for him spending his time with us today. And he will guide us through the global information sharing focal point that has been developed by UNICC in coordination with the Secretariat, and which, of course, will be available to parties as part of the global tracking and tracing system going forward under the protocol. So Shashank, please, I invite you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kate, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. My greetings to all the distinguished participants and the background that has been laid out by the Madam Chairperson, Dr. Adriana, and then Rodrigo as well, around the importance of the whole track and trace regime, and then in particular what the protocol mandates for the global information sharing focal point. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today and also sort of reflect back on our journey over the last 5 years when the working group first met in Panama in 2019, to be able to be in front of everyone here and actually present a real live working system, which will hopefully facilitate in the parties in meeting their mandate to the convention and the protocol. So I'll share my screen. I have a small presentation and a little video. Hopefully all the parties, everybody can now see my screen. Lovely. So before I sort of go into the details of what the GSP looks like, I would take the opportunity to actually thank all the parties, and then specifically the members of the Working Group 1, the key facilitators, and obviously the FCTC Secretariat. It is this interesting journey we had over the last 5 years, and in particular during the pandemic, to be able to come together, quantify our requirements, understand and interpret the protocol, quantify the requirements, and be able to sort of guide us and direct us into what kind of technology system to build. I think it speaks volumes of the work that has gone behind the scene, and also during the meetings of the working group, and a couple of them being virtual, to really bring it to the point today where we can proudly all look at what a working system looks like. So once again, a wholehearted thank you to everyone, and I do think Rodrigo certainly deserves a special mention. He's been instrumental in moving this forward for the working group. What I'm going to talk about broadly, and this is now, as I said, manifestation of what the GSP looks like. So we'll go into specific features of the GSP. We'll talk a bit about and see some visualization of how messages can actually be exchanged between the parties. Rodrigo has laid the groundwork by mentioning things like UIM and how UIM patterns are inserted into these queries to facilitate track and trace for the parties. I'll quickly go over the key requirements that Rodrigo has already summarized. The first and the foremost one was that this needs to be a simple email-like system. So hopefully, when the parties get their hands on the actual GSP, they will feel quite comfortable that it is a very easy to use manual system. However, the ease of use should not sort of it does actually abstract the complexity of other requirements that were placed upon us, such as that it has to be technology agnostic. So it should not impose on any party any specific technical requirement, whether be it manual or in future, as we look at the roadmap of GSP, when it needs to integrate with the national track and trace system. One important aspect to highlight, which Rodrigo mentioned under the banner of trust, was to ensure that there is end-to-end encryption. Again, repeating what Rodrigo said, that the FCTC Secretariat, and by their extension, we as UNICC, as the technical operators for the Secretariat of the GSP, we are not able to read any message that is being exchanged between the parties. However, the working group, and then thereby based on their proposal, the COP and the MOP did agree that there are certain aspects of this GSP which should be accessible to the Secretariat so that certain usage statistics can be. And this is what we call the metadata. And this metadata, while it is being exchanged securely, so to repeat again, it's not that it is insecure exchange of information, but it still gives the Secretariat the ability to report against the system usage. So how many parties are interacting with each other? What is the number of UIMs they're exchanging between each other? This kind of basic usage statistics can be gathered, but the actual content of the messages is hidden from us. And we, even as technical operators of the solution, will not be able to see it. So those are the key requirements. So the solution that we have built and we are marking the launch today, it works on any modern web browser. So as long as any of the party members who are going to use this, they have any of the browsers that are listed over there, which we are all sort of very familiar with, we use in our day-to-day life, the solution will work. It also, while we have that strict security requirement, it also means that we are not imposing any party to download or install any additional software on their machines, because we understand, especially in law enforcement, the laptops, the PCs that people work with are quite prohibitive in sense of what can or cannot be done on them. Hence, the only requirement is that a particular website where the solution, the GSP runs, is accessible, and it's using a modern web browser, and the solution will work. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have 2 levels of security. We have a password protected access. So members log in using a username and a password, something which we are all very familiar with in using various websites to access the system. And they overhead on that first access, if they are raising a query within the system, they enter some metadata such as which parties is the message intended for, how many UIMs are they querying for, etc. And that metadata is visible to the Secretariat for reporting purposes, as well as obviously to route the message. So if party A is sending message to party B, the Secretariat needs to know who the party B is to send them the message. But otherwise, there is a passphrase, a far stronger password that is needed, which we do not have access to. As when I say we, obviously, I mean the FCTC Secretariat and we, UNICC as the technical operators, we do not have access to this passphrase. And this is what is used to actually encrypt the message, so that when it is being stored in our systems, in our data centers, in our computer systems, it's actually garbled, it's ciphertext. So in no way, shape or form can we actually try, even if we try, we can't even read these messages. So these are sort of the key technical highlights for the GSP to meet the requirements that were laid down by the working group and thereby the extension, the MOP and the COP to the protocol. Very quick overview of the kind of users we have built into the system. Very obviously, there is the FCTC Secretariat. They have certain administrative tasks. They are the ones who can create a party in the system. They are the ones who can invite party administrators to come and use the system. We'll go into some details about how parties interact with the system and what is the role for different party users. They can manage these parties. They can, enable parties, or if a party has to be disabled or a party admin has to be disabled, they can do that. They do have a reporting dashboard, so the Secretariat has access to the metadata, and by extension, they will be able to share the reports on system usage with the interested parties. To repeat again, they cannot send or receive any messages, nor can they view any messages that are being exchanged between the parties themselves. That is not The system does not even allow them to do that. It's just prohibited within the system design. On the party side, which I'm sure a lot of you are interested in, we have a hierarchy of two users. We have something called the party administrators. The intent of party administrators is to allow the parties to have a degree of self-service. So once the Secretariat has gone through the workflow of creating party administrators, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, the party administrators themselves have the capacity to create new other users for their own party. And we are calling these new users party agent, which you see at the bottom in the box. They have capacity to appoint certain party agents and elevate their privileges to become party admins. The party admins can request that certain UIMs, the unique identification marking patterns, which Rodrigo spoke about, for their national track and trace systems are registered within the GSP. The idea of having this UIM directory is simply because it will allow the requesting party, the party which is sending the query, to quickly go through that directory and decide which party should they address their request to. So if let us say there is a UIM pattern that is registered for Kenya and Pakistan wants to send a query, they can actually look up in the directory, they can identify the pattern is registered for Kenya and therefore just send their query to Kenya rather than trying to sort of send that query to multiple parties. So all that activities can be done by the party admin, while a party agent can simply send or reply to messages. So this two-tier, very simplistic approach to start with will allow the parties to actually get comfortable with the system, use it, yet allow a degree of separation of roles so that within their countries or within the parties themselves, they can distribute the work. So these are the two broad roles. We will focus a bit on the party admin and the party agent because I am assuming that it is of more interest to the participants today on the call as opposed to what work the FCTC Secretariat can do. Right. So first and foremost, how do parties get access to the system? Very straightforward process. Working with the FCTC Secretariat, the Convention Secretariat, the parties will provide an email address of a focal point. The Secretariat will actually send an email. It's an automated email from the system. They will send an email to this focal point. The focal point will receive this email. The email will have a link within it. They will click on that link and they will actually fill in a form with some basic information about themselves. So their first name, last name, contact address, etc. But more important, within that request that the web form they're filling, they will attach a nomination to confirm from the protocol point of view that they are the party admin who can use the GSP on behalf of a party. The Secretariat will receive this information, they will approve it, they might have an internal process, but on the system, they will approve the party admin. And then the party admin will receive an email, which will allow them to come into the system, log in, and create this password and the passphrase. So this sort of process allows the Secretariat to actually understand and approve the various party admins. And now once the party admins have access to the system, they can create party agents, or as I mentioned earlier, they can even create party agents and promote them to be party admins. One very important thing to keep in mind for the parties is that we do require a minimum of 2 party admins, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, and one of the key requirements was that all the messages that are being exchanged via the platform are encrypted. Now, if there is only a single person who has the capacity to log in on behalf of a party and read those messages, in case of an event where they lose this passphrase, so the passwords we can recover, but the passphrases we can't because we don't have a copy of it, or there is a change in personnel, change in the focal point from the party, we do not want the parties losing access to the messages that have been exchanged. Therefore, it is very important that each party at least has 2 people, so that in case somebody forgets their passphrase or is no longer working with the GSP, a new party administrator can be created, and the new party administrator is easily granted access to all the previous messages that have been exchanged by that party by the current party administrator. So that control remains in the hands of parties, hence a minimum of 2 people that are required. Now, once a party has been created, they can create their agents for their own party. And once they create an agent, and we'll see in the next screenshot what kind of information is required, the request goes to FCTC Secretariat, they approve the agent creation, and then this new person can log into the GSP system. The party administrators can also disable agents because, again, as a life cycle of any system, we know people will change their roles. And if these roles are changed, they can come in and disable access to the system. And party admins can also submit new UIMs to be registered within the system. We'll see how that looks like in a moment. So we have enough of words. This is how the real system looks like. This is sort of a very simplistic view of this 5 years of effort. What you see on the screen is a screenshot that any party admin will get. In this example, we have somebody, for example, from Kenya logging in. You have the left-hand menu, which shows that they can see messages, different patterns, their own profile. And because they are party admin, they have an admin panel. And this is a screen for them to create a new user for their party. So they fill in basic information. They click the send for approval, which goes to the FCTC Secretariat, and then the FCTC Secretariat can approve and a new user is created. Now, once a new user is created, either the party admin or the new user can come into the system, and the screen you see on your on the screen right now, the image that you see on the screen right now, is how a new request is created. Now, in compliance with the protocol, what options you see on the screen is once you click on compose, is you can select the different parties to whom you want to address this. And a very important feature to highlight is if I am creating this request and I can select up to, let's say, 5 parties or 10 parties I'm sending this request to, none of the receiving parties will know who the other party to this message is. So I can come in and I can sort of create a request and I can address it to Kenya, Pakistan, and Panama. But when the representatives from Kenya, Pakistan, and Panama receive this message, they will not know that who are the other parties in this exchange. So for them, for the recipient, it's always a one-to-one exchange with the sender. I will select, if possible, if I have, let's say, 1 or 2 UIMs, I can select those UIMs. If I have a bulk of UIMs, let's say 100 UIMs, I can put 1 or 2 samples. This is just again to give the Secretariat some idea about the nature of UIMs that is being exchanged. The number of UIMs that in this query I am raising. So if, let's say, as I said, 100 UIMs, I will write the number 100. There is no technical check we can do to figure out if these number of UIMs is accurate. It is up to the parties to put this number correctly, because this is a useful statistic for the operations of GSP to know as to what are the number of UIMs that are being queried through the GSP. Then again, you select as per the protocol, what is the pieces of information you're looking for. Let us say a party has 100 UIMs they want to query another party with. They don't have to write all those details. We do provide the option of actually adding attachments. So you can actually attach an Excel sheet or a Word document or a PDF to say the list of UIMs you're querying is in that attachment, and you can then send the message. And as it says over here, this is an encrypted end-to-end message. So while the UIM and the number of UIMs, that metadata is visible to the Secretariat, and therefore they will be able to know that, for example, Kenya sent a request to Pakistan, they will not know the details of the actual request itself. And that's the requirement that was placed upon us. We can also add more information. It is quite obvious as a particular set of UIMs queries are being responded to. Both the parties may have more information for each other, and we provide there's a provision at the bottom. Again, it's like an email interface. You have all the requests that are in the system for a particular party. There is one particular request or an email, for example, you have chosen, and now you can write more messages, you can write more attachments, and you can send it. Again, this content is not visible to any of us. It also provides for parties to see only 100 messages, so it's easier for them to browse and check which messages they have not responded to, because as the system is being used, there may be need for multiple messages and threads might be going on at the same time. I spoke about the UIM directory. The UIM directory is a simple directory where a party admin can come in and create a new UIM pattern. It is up to the parties to define what kind of pattern it follows. If any at all, is there an expiration date? We have given that feature. Now we do understand a lot of parties may not have that need, but in case you have an expiration date for UIM, you can enter that and you can upload images. So when I, as a party admin or a party user, am coming in to create a query, I can then sort of click on this link and I can see the details. So I can see some of these pictures over here, which are from actually Spain, to say, okay, the contraband that I have seized, it looks like the UIM is from Spain. I can sort of refer to this directory or these patterns, and I can search these patterns over here as well to find out which party should I address my query to. So that's a very simple UIM lookup feature that we have. Finally, for the Secretariat itself, there is a dashboard. It shows basic reports to the Secretariat and thereby extension to the parties when they're interested. So how many parties are using it? How many users are there? How many UIMs are registered? What kind of exchange is taking place? So know which party is sending messages, parties replying to certain messages. Messages exchanges can be seen. So this is some of the basic information we can display over here, the trend of usage, which will help the parties to decide the future of GSP, because the working group has recommended a multi-tiered approach, starting simply with this interface and then extending it to add other functionalities. And it's this usage report that will really support on how to evolve the system to meet the needs of the parties for the GSP. I don't have any more slides, but what I would love to do is share a small video which shows the actual working system. That video is available on YouTube as well if you're interested in looking at it later on. So it's publicly available. But what this video shows is very quickly everything that I have described, but going it through rapidly. This is where Secretariat is sending an invite to the focal point. The focal point clicks on that link. They fill in a registration form. Once they have filled in the registration form, the most important bit, as we said, is for them to attach the nomination letter, which you will see being attached here. So they select a document, they attach the nomination letter and they send it for approval. Once the FCTC Secretariat is approved, now the party administrator, they can log in. You saw the screen before where a party agent is being created. We do ask for 2 email addresses, so it helps in recovery. And again, if people change and you have a common email address across the whole solution, you can use it. Compose message is something, as you saw earlier, we compose. In this case, we have a message going to Pakistan. The UIM being, so 111 UIMs being exchanged. We attach the list of UIMs and we send it. Now, when Pakistan receives it, they can then respond back to this message, which is something like what we're showing on the screen. So this was a message that this contraband was seized in port of Mumbai, and then they can respond back. So this was the request received by Pakistan. They come into the system, they say, oh, they can look at those details. What is the information India is looking for? They confirm that they can respond to this message as per the protocol's guidance. They attach any information. So Pakistan can attach a report from their national track and trace system, and they can send it across to India. So again, very simple track and trace relay-based system. This is the sample dashboard that we saw earlier, the screenshot. This is more the live version of it. And from repeating what we said earlier about the salient features and the requirements, and to confirm back to the parties in the call today that both the FCTC Convention Secretariat and UNICC will not be able to see any messages. It's a simple public website. That's the web address for that website. So it's technology agnostic. And yeah, hopefully, as the solution is used more and more, we'd love to sort of support the growth of this. I'll stop my share now. Thank you. And yeah, that's all from my end, Kate. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shashank, for that really excellent presentation and for the video that was very helpful as well. So without further delay and looking at my handy dandy clock, I see we have around 20 minutes left for questions for Q&A, which is wonderful. So that should give us some time to explore in greater detail some of these issues that have been raised by both you, Rodrigo, and Shashank. So we have had a few questions coming in through the Q&A section of the Zoom platform. And we'll start with the first question, which I think should probably be directed at Rodrigo. So Rodrigo, if you will, please. Question number one is a combination question. The first part being, is the UIM mandatory at each stage of the supply chain? And who's required to pay the cost of the codes affixed on the pack of tobacco products and simultaneously the cost of tracking and tracing? So maybe you can take up those questions, Rodrigo.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank participants for the question. So first, on the issue of the UIM and at the different stages of the supply chain, the UIM will be, as I was saying, affixed once, right? Like we said, this should be affixed before the product is put into the market. But if in one party, this party decides that they really want to track and trace the product throughout the different steps of the supply chain, the way that parties are doing that is that UIM that was affixed at the beginning when the product was manufactured or imported into the territory, this UIM is activated, let's say, at the different stages. So as the product moves along in the different states, people would activate. So this product has left a manufacturing facility and it's going to a warehouse. Now it's leaving a warehouse to go to a transportation. It's now entering a retail store, So at the different stages, this UIM will be activated. We are not going to have new UIMs. It's just a single UIM, the one that was affixed there at the beginning, but this UIM is recording, let's say, the different stages of the product throughout the supply chain. When it comes to the costs, as I mentioned in the presentation, the protocol says that those costs could be that the parties shall consider transferring the cost to the tobacco industry. So a way that many parties are doing that is that, as I was saying, they charge the tobacco industry per UIM that is issued. So let's say the tobacco industry is going to manufacture or to import an X number of tobacco products into their territory. So they will require this X number of UIMs, and they should pay a fee per UIM. And by doing that, the government recovers the costs that they have invested into the system. So I would say this is the way that parties that are, charging per UIM, they are finding to really, let's say, transfer those costs to the tobacco industry. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rodrigo. And in fact, there was another question on the cost. So I think this is a recurring question that many parties have. So we're quite happy to have the opportunity to address it. So another question, which I think again is headed your way, Rodrigo, but then we have one for you, Shashank, don't worry. So Rodrigo, the next question is, when is the GSP required to be in place? And will there be a mechanism for data validation or verification of party reports?
Thank you. And Shashank, please, you can help me with the second part of this question particularly. But just to say, we are launching this GSP today. The GSP will first be available for the members of the working group to pilot it, so after this session today, all members of the working group, they will be invited to nominate their party admins to the Convention Secretariat so that we can start sending that, invitation that Shashank showed to all of us, and they can register their party admins. And after the MOP, actually, after the next session of the MOP 3 that will happen in Panama in 2 months, this system will be available to all parties to the protocol, right? So we are launching today, starting in a pilot phase with the members of the working group to later make the system available to all parties after the third session of the meeting of the parties. I can try to start talking about the data validation, but Shashank will help me. So the validation, if the question was in terms of a human validation, the validation will happen because the system we are developing is completely, let's say, manual system, right? So whoever is behind the system is the one that will be generating an answer and sending back. But a validation from us, from the Convention Secretariat, or from UNICC, this will not happen because the system is fully encrypted, right? So we wouldn't be able, but Shashank, please help me here, because I think when we discuss this issue of encryption, you are the best to answer that.
I know, Rodrigo, I'll certainly make a try. So to answer the question specifically, simply put, short answer, there is no data validation within the system. And that stems from, I think, multiple layers of requirements and as well technical issues. As Rodrigo mentioned to start with, this is all encrypted. So, and this encryption is taking place in your web browser on your PC. So when you access this website that we showed, protocol-gsp.org, and you have an account, and you open it on a web browser, as I mentioned, and you start typing those messages or start putting attachments, and you press the send button, it's getting encrypted in your browser, and then it is being sent to us. So there is no way we can actually read anything over there and try and validate it. That's just the first challenge. And I think the second challenge, which is a big broader challenge, which has been discussed quite extensively in the working group, and I know this is part of the working group planning, is data structure. What constitutes a good data? How do you, for example, starting with very simple things like how do you specify a party's name? You know, do we use ISO 2-letter country code or ISO 3-letter country codes, etc.? So as that progresses, as that maturity progresses, then we can try and build something technically so that your system, whether your browser or if it's a national track and trace system from your IT solution, that some checks can be performed. But today, it is basically whatever the requesting party sends or whatever the responding party sends back, both the parties will see it in that format. And yes, one other important bit, while the application, which we did not mention, the website itself is available in the 6 official UN languages, the actual exchange of messages is not translated. Again, because we don't see those messages, so we can't translate them. But the remaining interface is translated into 6 official languages, and you can choose those languages or switch the languages at your convenience at any point in time. Over.
Great. Thanks so much to you both for those very excellent responses. So Shashank, we have a few other questions that we think should probably be directed your way. So a question, what kind or level of technical know-how will parties need to have to be able to participate in information exchange through the GSP? And then as an add-on, so what kind of assistance or support can countries expect in the pilot stage of the GSP?
So Kate, I'll take the first one, and again, Rodrigo and I'm playing tennis. I'll pass on the second one that the ball is in his court. Well, we do hope that we have created, working with the Secretariat, a lot of user guides. We'll have training videos, but our hope is that the system, as you saw, some of the videos is fairly intuitive to log in, to compose messages. So, and again, this is like you browse something like Gmail or Google Mail or, Hotmail or Outlook, one of those emails where you just logged into a system, you have a compose button, you have a respond button, and a send button. We've tried to keep it simple. We had experts who work on human interaction with IT systems, what are called user experience designers, working with us. So hopefully this is straightforward and intuitive, but again, we do have a lot of support material available via the Convention Secretariat for the parties to use and avail of. I think for support, Rodrigo, I'll pass over to you. Over.
Thank you, Shashank. So from the Convention Secretariat, we will be available to, answer to any requests for support that parties might have. As Shashank was saying, I think, when you really get into the platform, you will see that it's a very intuitive one, and, it's it should not be a problem. But that email address that I shared in my presentation, that I can repeat here, is protocol FCTC at who.int. That email address would be available for parties should write and request any kind of support. Then from the IT side, it will be colleagues from UNICC. Like if it's just something that from the Convention Secretariat we can solve, a doubt or a concern, we will solve from the Convention Secretariat. And then when it's really something that we feel we need UNICC to help with because we are facing, a bug or something like that, we from the Convention Secretariat will be engaging with UNICC and if needed, putting the party in contact with UNICC to get the needed support. But the support, they will be routed to the how to deal with them. Thank you. Sorry, Kate, if I can just add something. This was not a question, but in terms of the cost, it's something that I was wondering, because we frequently also have a question on if parties will need to pay for the GSP, right? So how much they will need to pay to use the GSP. And I was just wondering if maybe this was part of the question. So to use the GSP, parties will not have to pay anything. The system is already developed, is paid. This was included in the work plan and budget that was approved by the meeting of the parties. So to register their users and to use the system, all parties to the protocol will not have to pay any costs. Sorry about that, but I thought it would be helpful to the participants too. Thank you.
Not at all. That's very helpful indeed. Thanks a lot, Rodrigo. And so, of course, the issue has also been raised in the questions whether or not we can have the link to the video that was kindly prepared by Shashank and his colleagues at UNICC another time. So either today, but also I think in communications with the Convention Secretariat, we'd be happy to provide that as well. And it's very clear that not only are we playing singles tennis, we will also be playing doubles tennis with UNICC from time to time, but that the Convention Secretariat will direct the ball to the correct interlocutor. So we're quite happy to support in that regard. So another question that has been raised, Rodrigo, that I think you might be able to address as well. So we know that countries have different levels of implementation and capacity to establish national tracking and tracing systems. So what does the GSP mean for countries that don't have a sophisticated tracking and tracing system, especially for, say, lower resourced countries?
Oh, thank you very much, Kate. And indeed, a very good question. And again, Shashank, if you feel like adding anything at the end. So in order to respond to requests, a party will need to have a tracking and tracing, right? Because as we saw, the system is based on the UIMs, the unique identification markings, that will be issued by a party. So only a party that has a system that is using UIMs will be able to be supporting others and providing information from their systems, right? But even if a party is still does not have a tracking and tracing, this party will be able to query, to make a request for information using the GSP. So even if parties, they still don't have a tracking and tracing, or they have, let's say, a tax stamps regime, but still not yet with the UIM affixed to it, this party will be able to access the GSP to make queries, to request information. So let's say I don't have a system, but I seize products that I saw that they have a code from a particular party. I'll be able to go to GSP, identify in that library what is the party that has issued that UIM, and make a query for information. So all parties, even if they don't have, will be able to make queries. But we do encourage all parties to implement their tracking and tracing. We see a lot of parties, even low and middle income countries, progressing with the implementation of their TNTs, finding innovative ways of funding it through, the mechanisms that I described here. So we do encourage all parties to progress with this so important element of the protocol, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Shashank, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that particular response?
No, I think Rodrigo was perfect and excellent on that. Thank you so much. Over.
Very good. Thank you. So the next question concerns, the next two questions actually will concern the tobacco industry and tobacco industry interference, to be more specific. And I think you may be able to both answer elements of the question. So the first question is, though, we know that the tobacco industry and its affiliates aggressively attempt to influence tracking and tracing systems. This we know. So are there safeguards in the system to make sure that the exchanges of information are insulated from tobacco industry interests and from these attempts to somehow infiltrate the system?
Thank you, Kate. Maybe I can start by talking a bit on what parties can do, but Shashank, if you can help us afterwards talking about, how secure the system is, that will be appreciated. So I think, all parties, they need really to remember the commitments that they have first as a party to the WTO FCTC and the Article 5.3 that puts this commitment to protect the tobacco control measures against interference of tobacco industry. But then when we turn into the protocol itself will talk about that, under Article 4 and under particularly Article 8, right? When we're talking about tracking and tracing, we will be talking about this. And I think in my presentation, I try to so I think the first step is really parties understanding that the tracking and tracing system that the protocol talks about is a tracking and tracing systems controlled by the parties. It's not a tracking and tracing system that is controlled by the tobacco industry. So we are not talking about transferring the responsibility of tracking and tracing to the tobacco industry. So parties will need really to remain vigilant and ensure that their system is a system that they operate, that they control. And the information that they are giving to other parties is coming from this system and not from other sources. But I think, Shashank, you can talk about the system and, how we are ensuring that the system is really, really secure, to ensure that the information that is exchanged is secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. So I think we look at it when we talk about security, when we talk about privacy here, there are, to my mind, two layers. So first is obviously any judicial means to access this information. Now, hopefully, as our name suggests, as United Nations International Computing Center, we ourselves are part of the United Nations family. Officially and administratively, we are hosted by the World Health Organization, which is an interesting coincidence for us to work with the Convention Secretariat in this case. But practically what that means is that the systems, the IT systems that are running this solution are running on UN territory. Therefore, they are guarded by the privileges and immunities granted to the UN and its specialized agencies. And therefore, any judicial means to access this information is going to be very, very, very challenging, because this is not governed by any national laws, as you know. So this is all under the UN PNI. And those are to my mind, the legal means. Now, obviously, if you're looking at extrajudicial means of accessing this information, we ourselves have a very strong IT security team. The system that we have built has undergone some robust testing. But that doesn't mean this is going to be a one-time activity. The IT security testing of it is a continuous process. We have a very large security operations team, which continuously monitors the IT solution, looking for attempts to break into the solution. Now, obviously, we all acknowledge that even the mighty fall and a number of large IT organizations you know of have had compromises. We are quite vigilant, and therefore this most important element of this end-to-end encryption plays a very vital role, because in the very rare and odd circumstances, if it does happen that our systems are compromised, the actual data that is being stored is encrypted, and because we don't have the keys, we don't have the means to decrypt it, nobody who breaks into the system will have means to decrypt it. And that, because that encryption and decryption is really taking place using this passphrase. So as long as you keep your passphrase secure, the data is stored encrypted. In the very, very rare event of a compromise, it will still not be readable by anybody. So hopefully that to my mind is a very rare event. We are vigilant. We provide 24/7 security on this solution. We understand the importance of this, and our security team is completely behind this and keeping this safe. So hopefully that provides the answer and a bit of reassurance to the parties in the call today about the safety and the security of this. Over.
Thanks very much, Shashank. That is very reassuring indeed, I'm sure, for parties listening in as well. So we did have another question that was relating to the tobacco industry. If I can just find it. Oh, here we are. Yes. So the question is in respect of paragraph 13's requirement that parties limit their interaction with the tobacco industry. And the question is specifically, so how should this be approached where the domestic tobacco industry is under full control or has a monopoly in the state? So maybe, Rodrigo, you could take that on.
Sure, I'm happy to, Kate. Thank you. So again, I think we need to here remind ourselves that parties to the protocol, they are parties to the WTO FCTC, right? And under that article that I mentioned, the Article 5.3 of the FCTC, parties, they have agreed on guidelines for implementing that article. Those guidelines, they provide further information answering questions such as this one. And these were adopted by consensus, right? This was based, the guidelines, they were adopted under a decision that the Conference of the Parties to the FCTC, the WTO FCTC, the governing body of the FCTC has made. And in that decision, in the guidelines, it's clearly stated that the tobacco monopolies, they should be treated as tobacco industry. So the same safeguards that parties, they need to put for the tobacco industry that are, let's say, private companies, should be applied in the case that the tobacco industry is a national monopoly. So this was a decision that parties have taken, and I really encourage everybody to have a look at those guidelines of Article 5.3 of the WTO FCTC. Thank you.
Thanks, Rodrigo. Important to remind us all of, certainly. So one last very quick question for Shashank, and then I'll ask each of you if you have any closing comment that you wish to make before we wrap up for the day. So Shashank, again, more reassurance type questions. So are there any minimum system requirements or any back-end costs that countries need to prepare for in using the GSP?
Thank you, Kate. No, and as again, I think when we share the slides, this will be easier for the parties to see. We have just listed the minimum requirement to have a modern personal computer, laptop, whatever, running a modern browser for the parties to access the system. Now, and obviously this is a public website, and they can access this public website. So short answer is no, there is no onerous requirement. But having worked with some of the key facilitators and in the working group, we do realize that their national systems may have certain type of restrictions. So for example, even browsing over to this website using a web browser has been challenged for one particular party. because their national system of the customs organization was quite restrictive. So this is where we can support via the Secretariat in helping the parties work with their IT teams to allow access, but that's the minimum requirement that is needed. We are not expecting the parties to install anything. We're not expecting the parties at this stage to work on any IT integration. As the working group has laid out, it is only the third iteration of the GSP where automatic integration between existing national track and trace system and the GSP is being looked at, depending upon the needs and the requirements of the parties. So hopefully that clarifies the questions. Over.
Very much so. Thank you very much. So we can offer each of you, say, 30 seconds for a few final words if you have them. If not, I will simply make my closing remarks. Rodrigo, do you have anything you wish to say just at the end?
Just to say a big thank you and here, a big thank you to UNICC that has been supporting the Convention Secretariat, but also a big thank you to the members of the working group and the parties to the protocol. But, I would need to say the importance of the work that the key facilitators have put into this. They have been instrumental in supporting everything that we have done. So I just wanted really to close this by acknowledging their hard work and the support provided to what we have developed so far. Thank you, Kate.
Excellent points, Rodrigo. Shashank, any closing words?
No, just a big thank you to everyone. I think as Rodrigo has already mentioned, it's been a pleasure helping and supporting this initiative over the last 5 years. And we certainly look forward to supporting the parties, Secretariat, in actually enhancing and using this system, because I think everybody in ICCU has worked at it. For us, it's not just an IT system. We all believe in the real mission and the service the global track and trace is going to provide. So certainly it'd be a pleasure to continue our support. Over.
Thank you so much to both of you. Really, both panelists have been excellent and very clear in their presentations, and we've had comments in that regard in the Q&A section. So congratulations to you both for making what seems very complex relatively straightforward, and we'll continue that work as well. And thank you to everyone who managed to find time to join us today. We're really very pleased that you were able to join us to celebrate this 5th anniversary of the entry into force of the protocol. And of course, special thanks to the speakers, as I've said, but also please to the interpreters. I mean, really, without the interpreters, they play such an important role for us in facilitating our work, and we're very grateful for your interpretation and your work. And of course, we also would like to inform you that there will be a recording of this webinar will be available on the YouTube page of the Convention Secretariat. And you'll find a number of other resources there as well. And I'm informed by my colleagues in the Secretariat that we can also place the video that Shashank showed us on that YouTube webpage as well, in order to facilitate access for anyone who has an abiding interest in continuing to watch it. And it was certainly very useful. I'm sure it will be useful for a number of people. So I think that brings us to the end of our celebration, and which is also the beginning of our journey, which is very interesting. So it's an important milestone, but of course there's much room for development for all of us as we move forward in developing and enhancing the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. So I wish you all the very, very best of the day. And if I may speak on behalf of my colleagues in the Convention Secretariat, we very much look forward to meeting many of you in person at the upcoming 3rd session of the Meeting of the Parties in Panama in November. So thank you very much, and goodbye.